The future of racing, proclaims the box. FZero GX was the last game in the series to release on home console. There were only 2 further titles to bear the name, each using a similar engine to the one from 1990, and only one would ever leave Japan. The future of racing. Perhaps this future has not yet come to pass. FZero GX is one of my favourite games of all time. Released in 2003 for the Nintendo GameCube, we're a little overdue a new entry. Let's take a look back at FZero. Super Famicom, Mode 7. Yasunari Nishida, a programmer at Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development. He and a number of young programmers were asked to experiment with the new functions of the upcoming console. Nishida was making a racing game. Kazunobu Shimizu was brought on as director and designer, having recently worked on 2 racing games for the Famicom Disk System. His latest game, Famicom Grand Prix 2 3D Hot Rally, was presented to staff from Nintendo of America. They totally bashed it, recalls Shimizu. They were like, "This isn't a racing game. Racing cars should be cooler." They even said it wouldn't sell, and that ticked me off. Well, if that's what you say, then I'll make something really cool. While Shimizu was in America, Tim Burton's Batman was playing in theatres. With a sleek Batmobile fresh in his mind and a selection of comics in hand, Shimizu's designs took a more futuristic edge than his prior projects. The tyres were removed to save animation and memory budget, and the machines were made to hover. Mode 7 couldn't allow for much more than a single rotating flat plane, so the course floats high above a city. Add in breakneck speed, and you have FZero. With the Super Famicom nearing release, FZero graphic designer Takaya Imamura was approached to design a mascot for the console. Captain something. We started talking about what to do for the FZero packaging, and I tried drawing something in the style of an American comic. From these drawings came the illustrated game manual and Captain Falcon. The concept of a Super Famicom mascot was eventually dropped, allowing Captain Falcon to outlive the console. When Shimizu showed the game's designs to Nintendo of America, the response was overwhelmingly positive. FZero has become known for its high-speed racing. In order to make it possible to control with any degree of accuracy, the series' jump to 3D required an immovable 60 frames per second. The Nintendo 64 wasn't the most powerful console, forcing FZero X to sacrifice both texture definition and polygon count in the name of performance. It paid off, but the game undeniably has dishwater visuals as a result. These were problems its sequel wouldn't have. I first saw FZero GX on the Ocarina of Time and Master Quest bonus disc, and it blew my little mind, using the GameCube's resources to great effect. AX and GX were a collaboration between Nintendo, Sega and Namco. It was developed by Sega's Amusement Vision, known for the stellar Super Monkey Ball with which it shares the engine. The games are everything FZero should be. The cheesy comic book characters, the 2 fingers to Newton, and so fast that if you blink, you die. The future of racing. And that was it. The future flew by in an instant. There were several games to use the Mode 7 2D style, but after X and GX, they were only entrées to le plat principal, expansion packs to the first game, and tie-ins to an anime. FZero certainly went out with a bang, and Captain Falcon has been keeping himself busy since his retirement. He's of course most well known today for his appearances in Super Smash Bros. He's more a Smash character now than an FZero representative. Even his moveset is a Smash original, taking clear cues from early development test characters, from back before Nintendo's All-Stars were used. Mascot, Racer, Bounty Hunter, brawler. Even with only a few games under his champion's belt, the captain has done a lot over the years. But I suppose time is relative at those speeds. 8th of July 2003. FZero GX is set to release in a little over 2 weeks. Imamura and Miyamoto join Amusement Vision president Toshihiro Nagoshi in answering some questions about the new game. Of course, since I've worked on the FZero series and seeing the results of the collaboration with Sega, I found myself at something as a loss as to how we could take the franchise further past FZero GX and AX. It seems that even at this early point in the game's life cycle, Imamura considered GX to be the franchise's peak. GP Legend released on Game Boy Advance a few months later, and less than a year after that was followed by F-Zero Climax. This is the last game to release in the series. Imamura hasn't really spoken much about F-Zero since then, but it has been brought up by Miyamoto several times over the years. On behalf of Entertainment Weekly, Jeff Keighley asked Miyamoto in 2007 about any Nintendo games that he considered had missed the mark. In the past, we've worked with some outside development houses on titles like F-Zero and Star Fox, and let me just say that we were disappointed with the results. Consumers got very excited about the idea of those games, but the games themselves did not deliver. He then goes on to reference how The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess wasn't doing well in Japan at the time, a game that elicited a standing ovation at its E3 reveal. GX underperformed in Japan, though it did do well enough in the West to reach Player's Choice status, selling 1.5 million copies worldwide in its lifetime, according to Sega's Nagoshi. FZero X was the last in the series to be developed in-house, with the 3 GBA games developed by ND Cube and Suzak, and of course GX by Sega's Amusement Vision, and AX manufactured by Namco. Star Fox similarly saw a drought following underperformance on the GameCube, also developed by third parties. Of course, Star Fox saw a brief resurgence in recent years, a fate very nearly shared with F-Zero. Criterion Games, an English developer, most well known for their Burnout and Need for Speed titles. They're also owned by EA, so I'd be very careful if I were you lads. Perhaps in regards to their racing game heritage, Criterion was approached by Nintendo of Europe in 2011 and asked to pitch a new F-Zero game. As reported by Nintendo Life, the game was to be a launch title for the Wii U, which would launch in November next year. But NOE also wanted a playable proof of concept to be delivered in time for E3 to coincide with the unveiling of the Wii U. At the time, Criterion were focusing many of its resources on the multi-platform Need for Speed Most Wanted reboot, which released only shortly before the Wii U, and so taking on another simultaneous project was not possible. The Wii U instead launched with Nintendo Land, a demonstrative party game designed around showing off the gamepad's features. Among other Nintendo franchises of varying degrees of liveliness is Captain Falcon's Twister Race, essentially a self-unctuous driving minigame. At the launch of the Wii U, Miyamoto was interviewed by GameCult, a French gaming website. The machine translation is a bit wonky, so I'll instead be going by Nintendo Life's translation. One of the games French gamers miss the most is F-Zero, says William Ordereau. Nobody really understands why Nintendo hasn't made a new one since 2004. Is there a chance we can see it back on Wii U? Miyamoto reportedly looked surprised. I am really pleased to hear Twitter's opinion, because since the first episode on SNES, many games have been made, but the series has evolved very little. I thought people had grown weary of it. I'm also very curious, and I'd like to ask those people, why F-Zero? What do you want that we haven't done before? It may seem strange to hear that Miyamoto thinks we have grown weary of the series, but bear in mind that sales of F-Zero games diminished with each entry, so from Nintendo's perspective, from a business perspective, it could certainly have seemed that way. E3 2013. Mario Kart 8 is unveiled to the world, featuring gravity-defying tracks that seemed a little familiar. Richard George of IGN brought the matter to Miyamoto. I think where I struggle is that I don't really have a good idea for what's new that we could bring to F-Zero that would really turn it into a great game again. I don't know at this point what direction we could go in with a new F-Zero. He continues, everyone says, oh well, where's this game that I want to play? Where's something new? I only have so much capacity. Obviously in the past we've tried to work with other companies, where we've let them develop games for us in franchises like Star Fox and F-Zero. But the more we think about it, the more we prefer to be able to create those games internally on our own. We've obviously, as I mentioned, been working on what we can do to increase our internal staff in a way that will allow us to have more projects going at the same time, so we can create new games and work on additional old IP and still maintain the other primary franchises that people want to see. Mario Kart 8 features the return of the Blue Falcon, which also appeared in Mario Kart 7. Courses based on Mute City and Big Blue were added in DLC, along with series' first 200cc speed. It's not the same thing by any stretch, but it's certainly a fun distraction. The last official mention I have on my timeline is from a Let's Play, of all things. Miyamoto joined YouTubers Smoshed Games to play Mario Kart 8 and to generally talk games. When asked about the possibility of the return of F-Zero, Bill Trinan, translating for Miyamoto, said, "We see a lot of other designers who are making more traditional style racing games, so we've tried to focus on something that feels a little bit more gamey. So maybe if we create a new type of controller interface and we find that controller interface is particularly suited to F-Zero, then maybe we'll do something again with it in the future." This is strangely cryptic. On the surface, the term controller interface seems to refer to the game controller, but I don't think that's what Miyamoto and Trinan were getting at. F-Zero isn't a series that requires a particularly specific interface. The 3D games only really need an analog stick, and while GX benefited from analog shoulder buttons, they aren't really a necessity. At this point in time, Miyamoto was working on Star Fox Zero, a game built around the functionality of the Wii U gamepad. While the TV shows a traditional behind-the-ship view, the gamepad provides a first-person view of the R-Wings blasters. Were it not for the gamepad, I strongly doubt that Miyamoto would have been interested in making a new Star Fox game. I think this sort of thing is what is meant by controller interface. This kind of thinking is both Miyamoto's creative strength and weakness. Every game has to bring something new, something unique, a fresh perspective, and a new way to play. Gaming traditionalists may bemoan waggle controls, but the motion-sensitive Wiimote made possible experiences that could not be achieved with a standard controller. For better, or for worse. An analog stick allows you to exert a variable yet constant force in any one direction on a single plane. This is ideal for 3D worlds, once games were no longer confined to grids. A stick also has feedback to let you know when it's registering 100% input. The stick physically stops moving. Motion controls are more loose. The idea is that you emulate the action on screen with your body, but very quickly the facade falls away. Many games on the Wii checked for an input threshold, like the clutch on a car. If the motion sensor registers a value above X, then input equals true. At this point, you might as well just press a button. Accurate and responsive. Driving games do not necessarily benefit from motion control. While many players enjoyed using the Wiimote as a steering wheel in Mario Kart, the game's slower, more accessible nature smoothed over the inaccuracies in control. I played Mario Kart 8 primarily with an SNES controller D-pad. Accuracy isn't paramount in Mario Kart, as long as you can indicate which direction you want to go in and for how long you want to go that way. That's all you really need. F-Zero is, by nature, too fast. Motion controls are not accurate enough in the areas required for this type of game. I used to have real difficulty steering with the Wiimote, as I could never tell if the game was registering 100% turn, and would occasionally rotate the controller so far that it was upside down and now steering in the other direction. In F-Zero, that would be game over. I can't imagine something at the speed of GX working well with motion controls without essentially dumbing it down. But perhaps controller interface doesn't solely mean the human input. After all, the DS, 3DS and Wii U have an additional screen. Many handheld games use the two screens to great effect, but the Wii U gamepad, for the most part, serves its games with a simple map or menu, or as a mirror of the TV display. Star Fox Zero tried something different, and while it suffered in practice, it was still a decent idea in theory. I fail to see how F-Zero would benefit from a second perspective. You've nothing to shoot, why would you take your eyes off the road? Star Fox 64 3D released a few months after the launch of the 3DS. Miyamoto said in an Iwata Asks interview that he had decided on a Star Fox game for the handheld pretty early on, the main catalyst for its inception being the use of the auto-stereoscopic 3D feature. One theme of the Nintendo 3DS system was gameplay involving depth, explains Miyamoto. You can clearly see the depth involved, so I thought it would be more fun shooting with a laser. The last two Star Fox games were built around the controller interface, to showcase the effect of stereoscopic depth, the use of multiple simultaneous perspectives, and gyroscopic aiming. Miyamoto didn't start with a Star Fox IP and then fit it to the console. He wanted to make use of certain features the console has, and found Star Fox to be the most fitting foundation off of which to build. F-Zero doesn't really benefit from any of these things. The game is not better served by gyroscopic steering, and while stereoscopic 3D would be an immersive addition for some, I hear all too often players turning off the 3D effect and never using it, for dizziness, clarity, or just lack of interest. This is a franchise that was spawned by this hardware-centric way of thinking. It was a showcase for the Mode 7 3D effect. But what is it now? This is where Miyamoto's confusion comes from. To just make a game with nothing new is inconceivable to him. The franchise debuted in 3D with X, but was limited by the Nintendo 64. GX cranked up the speed, music, and visuals with little to hold it back. As Imamura said, I found myself at something as a loss as to how we could take the franchise further past FZero GX and AX. This is why we haven't seen a new F-Zero game for so long. But what could F-Zero do now that couldn't be done before? Let's take the Switch as our platform for our hypothetical new F-Zero game. It's the latest console and a decent fit. We'll be making a 3D racer, a la X and GX, and as is standard for those games, we'll have 30 machines in a race. The obvious improvement would be online multiplayer. Play with anyone in 30 vehicle races. GX's limit was in its multiplayer. In order to keep the frame rate up when rendering multiple player perspectives around the track, not only was the scenery severely cut down, but also races were limited to 4 vehicles, making the large tracks feel barren. GX had a stellar single-player experience. Multiplayer was a mere shadow. This is where a new F-Zero could improve, expand the multiplayer aspect, massive online races, and by connecting switches locally, I'm sure computer-controlled vehicles can be used to fill in those 30 slots for local multiplayer. Single switch split screen might not be powerful enough for a full 30, same as GX, but at least it'll finally be possible in some form. Creating custom vehicles and emblems was a fun distraction in GX, but I would love to see the return of the track creator from the 64DD expansion. Being able to create tracks and share them with friends would give the game near limitless content, and a public custom file browser? Alright, I understand we're talking about Nintendo here. Thing is, these are new features for old games. The steady expansion of a game with each entry. And that's just not how Nintendo makes games. Nintendo doesn't iterate on an old product with a new coat of paint and an extra bell or whistle. Often. They put play first. They start with some new idea or mechanic, something different in the way you interact with or experience the game. And then they pair an IP to it, or make something fresh. A new FZero game could only be GX, but bigger. GX, but a new one. And to Nintendo, that's unthinkable. As far as they are concerned, we already made a game like this. Go and play that. Here's the problem. How long after a game's launch before it disappears from the shelves? Unlike pretty much any other entertainment medium, games have a shelf life. After a few years, they go out of print, and while you can still find used copies online, over time it becomes more difficult, and in some cases more expensive, especially when you have to factor in the console. Little Johnny No-Thumbs can't just pop down the shops and buy a copy of FZero, and is he really going to go to the effort of tracking down a GameCube just for this one game he heard about online? You can buy Citizen Kane online on Blu-ray, DVD and VHS, and let's be honest, you can probably play one of those. Passive media can stay in circulation for a long time, and when a new format comes along, it's a simple matter of updating it. Games don't, and this is why sequels and even remakes are viable in this medium. With Nintendo reaffirming its stance on emulation, it doesn't really leave the average gamer with many options. Some old games become available online for digital download, such as through the Virtual Console, but the Wii U's selection was hardly extensive. The Switch has abandoned the VC altogether in favour of a tenuous on-demand model, and as we've seen, these services won't be around forever. FZero and X have been released digitally a few times over the years, but no such luck with GX. If you can't track down a physical copy, you've not got many options. Nintendo provides no recourse, but nonetheless has a history of aggression against emulation, or really any form of running their games on non-Nintendo hardware, regardless of whether they themselves currently offer any alternative. Of course, we're now getting into the morality of emulation, which is far outside the purview of this video. Point is, if you can't get the old games today, isn't that reason enough for a new title in the series? Miyamoto asked, why FZero? What do you want that we haven't done before? But if you can't actually play that which has been done before, what does that matter? The future of the series is in an unfortunate grey area. FZero was born from innovation in a time of simpler machines, but with X and GX, it reached its natural zenith. Nintendo doesn't know what to do with it, and without the consistency in sales as seen from the likes of Mario Kart, it can't just increment with every release. From limited technology came forth FZero, each release a showcase of its console's potential. Pseudo 3D on a 16-bit machine. True polygonal racing at a rock-solid frame rate. And breakneck speed with no compromise. This is the legacy of FZero, pushing often underpowered hardware to its absolute limits, in the name of the most brutal Grand Prix in gaming. But as technology caught up, the reason for its existence became controvertible. Consoles can go that fast now. But they don't. In its absence, parallels have been drawn between FZero and Wipeout, and recently the Fast series, as similar futuristic racers. But none of them push the boundaries of speed the way X and especially GX did. Only Sonic is comparable. Fitting. Instead of wide open tracks, dozens of characterful machines, and overly responsive control that means every mistake is your fault, you have confined roads with a camera angle to match, a modest selection of competitors, and vehicles that corner like a greased pig on stilts. These are good games, but they are not FZero. There exists a hole in the racing genre. The games are too slow, too forgiving, You don't have to wait for a straight in order to blink. And when was the last time you had to tilt the stick to corner, when the cruise ship you're driving requires a full tap? And how many vehicles measure from 0 to 100 not in seconds, but in frames? The future of racing exists, as it always has, in the future. My name is Stefan. Thank you so much for watching.